Thank you for joining us today. We are going to talk about what it looks like to develop your school's daily and weekly schedule. Kim, do you have any insights on what it looks like for a partner school to create their weekly schedule for their classes for their students?
I do. It can look like really how you want it to look like. We have different co-ops and schools that meet Monday through Friday, and we have some that meet just Tuesday and Thursday. So there is choices in there for even the days, let alone a particular day. We have some that will do math and science on a Monday, let's say, and then the next day just cover two other subjects. And then of course you have some that do their traditional daily schedule or weekly schedule, where they're meeting Monday through Friday and covering all subjects in there. So that's part of you being able to choose what works well for what your students are really wanting to learn and what you have the teachers available or anything like that. So there's a lot of flexibility on what a daily schedule looks like. Saying that, if you want some help or some examples of things that worked well for other schools, we can certainly help you figure out what might work best for you. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to the choices that you would like to do for your students.
That makes sense. So as the school is planning, about how long per lesson should they be planning for their students? Does it vary, or what's that look like?
It does vary a lot between elementary versus middle versus high school, but on average we say it takes 30 to 45 minutes per lesson. I would say similar for a test. Quiz would probably take a little bit less time than that. And we have projects, and projects are usually essays or science labs on there, and those can take up to an hour or two on that. And some of the science will actually go for a week. You're watching something grow, but the actual work to get that done is a few hours on there. But for lessons that are more of the daily work that they're doing, 35 to 40 minutes on there is what we say it runs on there.
Yeah, that's some great feedback. I know Enlightium has just changed how they're delivering the curriculum and the time frame. I'm really excited about this, where instead of offering the content 5 days a week, we are now moving it to 4 days a week, and we've removed a lot of the busy work that students don't necessarily need to master. What might that look like in a partner school if we're only having Ignition content for 4 days a week?
Correct. So it would look similar to any of the other things that we send out. When we talked about the daily schedule, was really about how you structure when the kids come in on site. If they come in Tuesday and Thursday, then they're still doing work throughout the week. And then that goes to your question of, since we're moving to the whole child mastery-based curriculum, we have assignments are only going to be due on a Monday through a Thursday, and Friday is set aside for the EA teachers and staff here to work with and provide more resources to them, so to the students. So at a co-op program or school, you could do something similar, where on Fridays that you have a day that allows them to work on projects or have questions or to do community service on there. But we did take things away from the curriculum that we thought were redundant. We be saying that our teachers and our faculty heads in the different subjects areas on there, and really tried to reduce it down to what they thought was the most important for the students to master that subject on there. So we're real excited about that, to allow more time for families not to have to be 5 days a week. So you could take that and run with that however you wish for a co-op school there, but it does provide a lot of flexibility again.
I love the idea of doing community service. You could use that other day for chapel or some of the other on-site courses.
Right.
Like, doing PE and that kind of stuff.
Right.
So what if a school wanted to do something like block schedule? I know most of our classes are set up where they take, maybe 3rd through 5th graders are taking 5 classes. They're doing those 5 classes all year. What about schools who want to do a block schedule? What would that look like?
The way that it looks like, I will speak to high school first, is that a block schedule, usually by semester. And so for the first semester, they would take math and science and 1 elective. That would equal basically, 5 or 6 classes time-wise on there. And then the next semester they would do the history and English and let's say health on there. So more subject content related in a specific time instead of covering 5 subjects in a day. And that is definitely another option that, again, for co-op schools may really like that because they may have a teacher that they want to be available for just a semester and have the second semester. So a lot of things to think about, but definitely some viable options to do.
So how does that work? If students do they have to work on the same classes at the same time, or can they work ahead on their own? What does that look like in a school setting?
In the school setting, for the Ignitia accounts that we use and that students are using with the partnership, if let's use the traditional, the five or 6 courses a day, even in that scenario, students can choose on their own to one day just work on English and do all their assignments on there, and the next day do math. So there are due dates in their Ignitia accounts. The due dates are really a recommended due date that will help the student keep on track to finish the course on time, but there is no penalty for a late assignment on there, and the teachers don't even recognize it as a late assignment on the due date. So that's something to communicate to the students and for you to know that just because there is a due date on a lesson or a subject, students can work ahead. They can be behind in some subjects as long as they are working and putting in the normal hours on there. Although saying that, I would say people get sick sometimes, so we should say that a little bit too. That may come up. That does not affect them getting behind. They can catch up fairly easily. Again, on those Fridays that we just talked about, that there's no assignments due that day. So being able to relieve stress from parents that are concerned about staying on track or on top of the subjects, or the students who really are interested in science and for 2 days want to do science, they can do that.
That's awesome. So what I'm hearing you say is as long as kids are more or less keeping up with their weekly workload,
Yes.
they can make their week look like what they want, and
Yes.
the school can make it look like what they want.
Yes.
I love that. Okay, so with that said, is there
hard questions coming?
The hard questions coming. Is there a deadline where okay, this grace period for getting behind is over? Is there any point where you're okay, the rubber's meeting the road, you really do actually need to have all these assignments to get credit? When does that happen?
That happens for high school at semester.
Oh.
And so there is that timeline. I'll use English as an example. English 1A is in the first semester, and the end date is in January, and you are expected to get the student is expected to get the work done there. So yes, there is a hard end date. We also here, in partnership with you, we do audits, look at them and do report cards at the quarter mark, and we do like them to be up to date then, but that's not a hard deadline. The hard deadline is either the end of the year or at the semester at the semester break on there. So
right, because that makes sense. With high school, transcripts are permanent.
That's true.
So they have to have that done.
Right.
But I liked what you said. The quarter break is a soft deadline. Semester, end of the year is a hard deadline.
Right.
That's really great.
But since we are talking to people who are interested in starting a school or a co-op, but I know this question is going to come up, and that is what happens if our students don't meet that deadline and they don't finish the class. And there are things that we can do to help them complete that. So it may be extending that course and allowing them to finish. Then what we do though is we usually take an elective course from the second semester off, because if they take longer to do one science class, they still need that second semester, and that's going to have to be squished in a little bit more here. So we can juggle around their courses some to allow a student to finish their courses and things like that. But as a principal or as somebody that's trying to start a school, that's important to know.
What about summer school?
Summer school.
Is summer school an option for partner schools?
We do offer summer school. In the Alliance program, it has not been typical that kids go to summer school, and that's mainly because they're usually part of a brick and mortar, and you're not going to have staff there during the summer. So that is the reason we don't have summer school. The caveat is There has been 1 or 2 students that haven't finished, and the co-op coordinator on site has asked, can they take summer school? And yes, we are able to do that on there.
That's
It's
wonderful.
not as typical, but
it's
option.
available
It
as
is.
an add-on option if you need it. So I love that, a little safety net. One of the things you talked about very briefly earlier was projects. Is it okay if kids, let's say we've got a big group of 9th graders and they're all taking science together, how does the Enlightium feel about kids collaborating on those projects? What's that look like?
Well, that's one of my favorite things, actually. One of the top 5 about the Alliance program, and working with other schools and co-ops who are meeting on site, is the fact that if they choose to do science labs together and to do projects together, because getting them together and have that camaraderie, it becomes, I think, more exciting for them and hands-on. So we encourage that if that's what you would like to do and that fits in there. But what it looks like to teachers sometimes, and I think that's what Desiree is referring to, is if they're going to work on a project together, they need to submit their project endpoint. Result can be the same from the lab, but they are going to need to write a paragraph, and that paragraph needs to be in their own words on there. If not, if they're like copy and pasting the exact same thing, the teachers do not like that very much. So it works really well. You need to make sure that we communicate to the students that they have to write it in their own words on their essays and their labs.
I love that. So I like that they can collaborate, they're working together, but they're not plagiarizing each other. Huge, huge point.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
And thank you for joining us today in our session as we talked about what setting up a daily schedule might look like for your school.